Hello and a very warm welcome. My name's David Roth from WPP, and it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to Follow the Sun, 24 hours of broadcasting right across the world to celebrate the launch of the WPP BAV Best Country Study for 2021, done in conjunction with US News and the Wharton Business School. It's a pleasure to have you join us for this section. Of course, this broadcast is going to be right across the world. We're starting in Australia and New Zealand, and we'll be ending at the end of the 24-hour period in the USA. Well, we've got an absolutely packed broadcast today, and I'd like to start off by introducing Mike Sussman from BAV. Mike has been the brainchild behind the Best Country Studies for many years, and there's nobody better to put the Best Country Study into context. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, David. We're really excited about the launch of the 2021 Best Countries study. It's the most comprehensive study of the power of nation brands. We've been doing this for 6 years, covering countries that represent 95% of the global GDP and about 75% of the world's population. So an amazing coverage. This year, we're looking at 78 countries. We spoke to over 17,000 business decision makers, citizens, and elites around the world. And we've ranked countries on a battery of metrics, including 26 key rankings that we'll talk about throughout this report and throughout the app. One thing we've seen over time is the shifting impact of soft power. It's becoming more and more important to driving the power of a country, while hard power, like banks and tanks, as we call it, the more traditional power, is becoming less impactful on the success of a nation. When we think about the power of a nation, we think about 10 key dimensions, and you can look at each of these ranks and how a country does on these things, from entrepreneurship to cultural influence to quality of life. We've introduced 2 new ones that are becoming more and more important today in these changing dynamics of culture. One of those is how purposeful, how socially purposeful is a nation. And the second is how agile is a nation, how responsive it is to things, particularly during a COVID era. And both of those dimensions are extremely important in driving the GDP and the success of a nation. Agile nations are seen as 3 times more likely to be a better job market. They're rated 3.2 times more likely as being economically influential. They are more connected to the rest of the world. So agile nations are doing something to resonate with people globally. Really important to mention, and it's the biggest driver now of GDP. And that's something that the nations need to be more and more of today. So when you think about agility, the top nations around the world this year are USA, number 1 in terms of being an agile country, followed by Australia, and in 3rd place is Canada. We continue to see the rising power of purpose, not just for brands, but also for nations. In fact, purposeful nations are 57% more likely to be considered for tourism, 55% more likely to be considered as a place to do business. So it's important to be seen as a purposeful and socially responsible country. Number 1 on this purposeful dimension is Canada, followed by Denmark, and in 3rd place is New Zealand out of 78. So pretty impressive, pretty strong dimensions, very important. We also see the power and impact of brands that resonate from countries. In fact, 79.5% of citizens say that consumer brands play an important role in defining a country's culture. So there's a strong relationship between the brands and the nation. We also see that 78.6% of citizens say that the country a product is made in impacts their preference for a brand. So you can see that interplay between brand and country and how important it is today. And we started measuring the power of what does it mean to be made in a specific country. What does made in America mean, and made in China? And we can rank the power of these nations in terms of their exports. So, for instance, Germany ranks number 1 in terms of the country you'd want to buy an automobile from. They also dominate on pharmaceuticals and beer. So you can see a little bit of a balanced power of that nation. Italy is number 1 on fashion. So that's the top brand for when you're thinking about buying fashion brands. France owns cosmetics. In terms of the best countries for real estate, Canada ranks number 1, followed by the United States and then France. So overall, again, you can see how the building blocks of a nation affect its overall ranking. And we're excited to share some more details with you. Back to you, David.
Well, now it's time to get an overview of the key insights from the 2021 study on a global perspective. And who better to do that for us than Professor David Riepstein from Wharton University. Professor Riepstein has been our partner in this study since it started, and his unique understanding and unique perspective of countries, of brands, and what's driving GDP growth is unrivaled. So let's hear from David now.
Hello, I'm Dave Riepstein. I'm a marketing professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. I've been involved with the Best Country Study since its inception. This year has been a different year. It's been a transformational year. There's been many things that have affected how we view countries and how we live our particular lives. First and foremost, obviously, we've had to deal with the COVID-19 and the tragic loss of millions of lives all around the world. Accompanying this has been the huge impact on economies of various different countries, leading to an overall global recession. Some countries have handled the pandemic well, such as South Korea and Taiwan and several others, whereas other countries have not handled it nearly as well. Accompanying this pandemic has been the subsequent vaccine distribution. And this has required acquisition of vaccines as well as some form of equitable distribution of those. Perhaps Israel has been the country that has done the best at it. There are others that are catching up, but there are other countries that are still struggling today with trying to manage the vaccine distribution. A third major thing that's been happening this year has been the Black Lives movement that originated in the United States and has found it in various other countries all around the world. Climate impact has been a major event that's happened in various different countries. Perhaps the most notable are the brush fires that happened in Australia. We've seen other events, such as the explosions that happened in the Beirut port, killing millions of lives. And of course, we could not ignore Brexit and the impact that's had on the British economy, as well as the economies of Europe. Many, many events have made this year an exceptional year. And it's part of what it is that we've all had to adjust to. Perhaps the greatest impact, of course, has been the pandemic. And what we have witnessed as individuals is we see that how we buy and where we shop, that's changed. How we work, many of us working from home, some of us not having jobs. So there's been a dramatic impact for individuals, where we eat and how we interact with family and friends, dramatically affected, and we've had to adapt. Businesses have had to adapt as well. And what they have had to do is how they connect with their customers has changed. Meetings have changed. The ability to have trade shows dramatically affected. The whole supply chain has been disrupted. And certain industries, such as the hospitality industries or the airline industry, have been dramatically affected, with sporting events being canceled throughout the world. So many, many industries have suffered as a result. And when I've talked to business leaders, almost inevitably, what it is that they tell me is they've needed to be agile. And it sort of is the buzzword that I hear from companies. But that's not restricted to just individuals and companies. Countries have had to adapt as well. And what it is that we have seen is we see, obviously, trying to get the healthcare systems up to speed and handling with this medical crisis that we've got. And getting medical supplies to the hospitals and to individuals has also been an issue. But trying to cope with the unemployment levels and trying to deal with that and supporting the local governments has been a major issue for countries all around the world. And what countries have had to do they've had to adapt as well. Well, we too at the Best Country Study have had to go through our own adaptations. We've added 13 new attributes that we use for evaluating countries, and we have taken one of the previous dimensions, that of citizenship, and we have morphed it into a dimension that we call social purpose. And what is social purpose? It has many of the dimensions that we had in citizenship, but it also includes dimensions such as human rights and racial equality and social justice and climate concern, that have all been attributes that now feed into the social purpose dimension. And we've added a new dimension. And this new dimension, this new overall factor is one of course, agility. And what is it that we have feeding into agility? Our perceptions of countries in terms of their adaptability and in terms of responsiveness and how progressive they are and how modern they happen to be and how dynamic they are, all feed into this agility dimension. So with that said, let's take a look at the latest rankings that we have.
Kia ora, I'm Anna Gunnell, and I have the pleasure today to talk you through how New Zealand performed in the Best Countries study. And it's good news for little old New Zealand. We're currently ranked number 7 out of 78 countries. That's up 4 points from number 11 last year, and up even further from where we were in 2017, where we ranked number 14. One of the areas where New Zealand was really strong was in social purpose, where we actually ranked number 3 after just Canada and Denmark. Social purpose covers a number of different areas, including environmental concerns, human rights, racial and gender discrimination and equity, but we'll cover that in a bit more detail later on. You may also be interested to know how we differ from our friends Australia across the ditch, and they are in things like the social purpose I mentioned before, but also in terms of being open for business and having an agility, a mover, being a bit more dynamic than Australia. Where New Zealand does rank really highly is in terms of adventure and being tourism friendly, and also, funnily enough, being a bit sexy of all things. And we're also seen as having a great quality of life, and that being in the stability of that everyday life. Another area New Zealand didn't perform so well in was actually food, which hurts me a little because I'm a real foodie and I think we do have an amazing mix with our different cultures. I would hope with things like Hiakai, which is a contemporary New Zealand restaurant concentrating on local foraged Māori food, which was named in 2019 as one of Time's places to kind of visit, New Zealand's food profile will be elevated. And speaking of food, we'll provide you with a wonderful cocktail recipe and also another recipe later on. And remember, there is a reason for all of those lamb and sheep jokes. So what do 3rd and 4th placed Germany and Switzerland have that New Zealand doesn't? The first is entrepreneurship, where it's actually really disappointing, I think, for me and a number of New Zealanders when you looked at this, where we're actually only ranked number 19, which is our lowest level since the survey has begun. In New Zealand, we actually do perceive ourselves to kind of have this number 8 why mentality, where we look at problems and think, how can we solve them with the tools that we have at the moment? So it does create for quite an innovative culture, or at least that's the perception of New Zealand internally, but this isn't actually being seen on a global scale. The other area New Zealand doesn't perform as strongly is actually in terms of power, which I suppose when you're a country of 4.5 million, maybe it's not that surprising that we're not seen as being powerful. But my other theory is that New Zealand is performing less well in the power stakes because we actually exhibit a different type of power. Our power actually comes and it's manifested in our leader, Jacinda Ardern, where we are small and we are a strong country, but we are strong in the traits in terms of being kind and empathetic, which are different leadership or different kind of power skills than have been seen previously on a global stage. New Zealand seems to be using these soft measures to its advantage as a challenger brand. And if we look at through the lens of the Eat Big Fish principles for a challenger brand, we can see how this is playing out. In the past, we're probably more focused on that kind of pure, you may have heard the line, 100% pure New Zealand, but now those kind of more soft powers, again, that compassion and kind of kindness, I think are becoming more defining around what that identity is. The second aspect of a challenger strategy is to assume thought leadership, and New Zealand has done this in various ways, be it the pay equity or parental leave, where New Zealand is one of the first countries to, if you have a miscarriage, both the father and the mother receive leave. Also sanitary products going into all high schools and making it easier for New Zealand females or males to kind of pursue pay equity claims. Another aspect of a challenger brand is that actual behaviour of the brand, and we see this manifest in a couple of different ways for New Zealand. In terms of their response with the pandemic, they chose to put their team of 5 million, as it was kind of couched, before the economy. So it was a people first strategy, which was different versus other countries around the world. Another aspect is actually in terms of how our Prime Minister turns up in popular kind of culture. if I look at how she kind of communicates with people to connect with them, it is on their platform. So using things like Facebook Live, and also being in unexpected titles like being the face of Vogue, where you wouldn't normally expect to see a Prime Minister. Time will tell with New Zealand, but I think as long as that social purpose is at the forefront, that is what will truly allow New Zealand to continue to challenge the global powers. One of the interesting things when we kind of dug into the Best Countries report was the link between trust and actually the COVID response. And what became clear when we kind of dug into the data was that that increase in rankings was actually linked to how people responded to COVID. New Zealand leads this charge, actually up 4 places in the rankings, and then when we looked at the COVID cases, it has just 496 COVID cases per 1 million residents. Australia managed to go up 1 place in the rankings, but if we look at its number of COVID cases, it had 1,137 COVID cases per 1 million residents. On the other hand, those who have actually performed less well in the rankings, there seems to be a link between their poor management of COVID and their decrease in the rankings. Was it the COVID response that drove how people performed or how countries performed in the report? Or is the report just a prediction of the best and safest countries to live and conduct business? One of our strong observations from the Best Countries report was that countries really don't tend to move that much, which does make New Zealand's shift from 14th place in 2017 to 7th place this year such a remarkable achievement. So the question is, how did New Zealand kind of get here? Why have we made those kind of moves? This may have been affected by the appointment of Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand's Prime Minister, where we see New Zealand has risen from 9th to 3rd place in social purpose, up 31st to 37th place in power, and also up from 13th to 6th place in open for business. Other aspects where you could argue potentially New Zealand's getting a halo effect from its Prime Minister is that it ranked number 1 in terms of friendliness and a place that people wanted to live. And I think that place that people want to live is a place in today's world where we're all welcome, and that's what we saw New Zealand and Jacinda Ardern exhibit after the massacre on March the 15th, where the whole country came together. It wasn't about a certain group within the country, it was the whole country that had been hurt by the attacks. It has certainly helped New Zealand having such a powerful leader on a global stage. New Zealand came in 9th in terms of its agility. That agility is based on it being responsive, progressive and agile. And I think this is it's a new attribute to the study, but it's one that was particularly relevant when I look at the way that we at VML-Y&R New Zealand work. I think communications or clients today demand that we need to be more kind of responsive, more agile and more adaptive. One example I wanted to share with you today was work that the VML-Y&R New Zealand team did with the Electoral Commission. They normally put out one campaign to talk to all New Zealanders to get them to vote, but 30% of the population weren't engaging with these comms. So to keep on going with the same old approach wouldn't get the results that they required. Instead, we took a really innovative approach. Rather than having one message fits all, we created a campaign of 34 different culturally nuanced campaigns to reach our diverse audience. One example of this is Vote Ghost.
This is my mate Ted. Say hello. Half of young New Zealanders don't vote, and Ted here is one of them. He doesn't have a voice.
Well, if no one else wants it.
He doesn't really get a say on the way things are done. He's pretty much invisible, poor bloke. You're a vote ghost, aren't you, Ted? But we can fix that.
Vote.
Don't be a vote ghost. Boo.
Another campaign that VMLY&R New Zealand has been working on is for ACC. This campaign was all around how to help New Zealanders prevent injury. But we, in that same agile approach, have taken a test and learn approach with this rather than try and solve the whole problem in one go. Instead, with research, we identified 4 different mindsets. And of these mindsets, we identified 2 that would take forward, as they represented 66% of kind of claims and had the most accidents. So we created comms around these 2 mindsets, being the opportunity and the nurturer mindset, and we'll put those into market for 2 years, see how communities and the different groups and mindsets respond to these comms, and then evolve as we go.
Woo! Bro, reckon I could jump from there? Pretty high. Nah.
If I get hurt, who's gonna feed Neil Fins? Who's gonna coach the minis? Who's gonna wingman Jared? Who's gonna take me to the toilet? I'm so sorry, bro.
Yo! Fun news!
Another aspect where VMLY&R New Zealand has been kind of really progressive and lived up to that dimension of agility is in its work it's done for Ryman's, which is a retirement village client that we have. And the category, or for boomers or older, is awash with grey-haired people at the end of their life going out quietly. What we did was to flip that on its head and actually celebrate the spirit and attitude of these people in a really progressive and contemporary manner.
Silk is magical.
Hey, little girl.
It makes you feel as brave as a lion.
Do your stuff. You better get
Never did any music until I was 65 when I retired. The rest is history.
You can
I love fashion. I dress up to feel good.
the real stuff. Hey!
I feel amazing.
It's been really pleasing to see how New Zealand has performed in the Best Country study. I'm looking forward to the next results already, but thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you all very much indeed. To celebrate this very special launch, we've created a very special app. It's a virtual reality experience where you can literally visit every single country that's featured in the 2021 study. Well, you can get it on your desktop, your laptop, your tablet, your mobile phone. All you need to do is just download it from the URL that's on the screen here. Enjoy, explore. It's full of interest and insights, and we'll be refreshing the content frequently over the course of the next few months. So please do go back frequently. Earlier, I talked about the significance of countries being seen as brands. This is being increasingly realised right across the world, not just by business leaders, but by governments at the most senior of levels. I caught up with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands and asked him how important he believes country brands are. Mr. Prime Minister, what contribution do you think that retailing makes to the economy and society in general?
So many. I mean, it is the biggest employer in the Netherlands. 900,000 people are somehow connected to the retail sector, so it is huge in its economic impact. That means that many people, in many cases young people, start their working life experiences in the retail sector. It is also a place where you can learn how to be more entrepreneurial and how to start your own business. It is a sector in our economy which is very much focused on innovation and disruptive innovation. It is very much connected to the modern economy, to the internet, to online shopping. So there are so many positives. And it's also a place where people come together. It's also a sort of community place. In some of the stores, people drink a cup of coffee, meet friends, and then buy some stuff. So it has many, many impacts on society.
Mr. Prime Minister, you had a fantastic career at Unilever. You obviously know brands very well. Do you think country brands are as important as product brands?
Oh, they're crucial. And what I found in this job is that the brand of Amsterdam, the brand of the Netherlands, the brand of Eindhoven, or the whole commercial area around cities like Zwolle and Amersfoort are crucial for our international standing. And the fact that you can bike to school as a child, that it's relatively safe here, that there are so many possibilities when you like sports or culture. And I really learned to brand that much more than we did already.
One last question, Mr. Prime Minister. What advice would you give retailers today who are under a lot of pressure, under a lot of stress? Everything's changing very fast.
Yeah, but still, at the same time, you are in a fascinating sector. So enjoy what you are doing. We live only once. This is the real thing. This is not the. So you have to make the best of it. And there are so many opportunities for good salespeople, for good businessmen and women, to make use of all those opportunities which are out there, and do realize that you play a very important part in societies. You are really part of society.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow, I can't believe it. We've come to the end of our broadcast. We're almost out of time. I'd like to thank everybody who participated in today's broadcast. And just to remind you again, please do download the app and enjoy going virtually into every single one of our countries in this year's 2021 Best Countries Study. So from me, David Roth, thank you very much indeed. And Mike, thank you very much indeed as well.
My pleasure. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
Well, have a great rest of the day. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We really appreciate it. you.